Life isn't what most of us think it is. According to Carl Jung, the reality we believe we're navigating of choices, achievements, and individual control is actually an illusion created by the ego. Life isn't happening to you. Life is happening through you. This shift in perspective, though subtle, is monumental. Jung's decades of work with thousands of patients, along with his own deep psychological exploration, led him to a revolutionary insight. You're not just a person having experiences. You are the very lens through which life experiences itself. When people hear this, they often respond with confusion or disbelief, not because Jung's view is too complex, but because it's almost too simple, terrifyingly simple. It dismantles the illusion that we're in control, that we're building a life from scratch. Instead, Jung proposed that life has its own internal structure, purpose, and flow, and we are both the actors and the stage upon which it unfolds. At the heart of this framework is the idea that life is not random. It's not a series of disconnected events we must endure or escape. Life is a precise psychological unfolding, one that follows a pattern with the ultimate aim of making the unconscious conscious. Everything you go through, the highs, the heartbreaks, the mundane, and the magical, is part of a grand process designed to help consciousness know itself. Let's go back to the beginning. When you're born, you're physically alive, but psychologically unconscious. You don't yet know who you are or what drives you. You have no awareness of your inner architecture. You simply are. Over time, you begin to develop a sense of identity, a name, a story, preferences, fears. This is what Jung called the ego, the conscious self, the part of you that says, "This is me." But the ego is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies the unconscious, your shadow, your archetypes, your inner drives, and the deeper truths of your being. Jung's work revealed that the entire structure of life is oriented toward bringing these hidden elements into the light. Everything that happens to you is for this purpose. Trauma isn't just pain, it's a signal. Recurring patterns aren't just frustrating, they're messages. That person who triggers you, they are a mirror of something within you that is yet to be understood. That dream you keep having, it's your unconscious trying to speak to you in symbols. Life isn't chaos, it's a coded language. And once you begin to decipher it, everything changes. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But he didn't stop there. He took it one step further. This process of bringing the unconscious to light is not a side quest. It is the very essence of life itself. You're not here to be comfortable, or even to be successful in the traditional sense. You're here to wake up, to become aware, to integrate all the parts of you that you've hidden, feared, or ignored. Jung's understanding of life as a process of consciousness waking up to itself takes us beyond the surface level of personal development. He didn't see your problems as mere obstacles to overcome, or your suffering as meaningless accidents. Instead, he proposed something radical. Your entire life, the good, the bad, the inexplicable, is a living dialogue between two centers of consciousness within you, the ego and the self. Let's clarify these terms. The ego is the version of you that you're most familiar with. It's the part that has a name, a job, desires, fears, goals, and opinions. It's the voice in your head narrating your life, making plans, taking credit, and assigning blame. It believes it's in charge. It's the character you think you're playing in this story. But the self, in Jungian psychology, is something far more expansive. It's the totality of who you are, both conscious and unconscious. It includes your shadow, your higher potential, your dreams, your archetypes, your instincts, and your spiritual nature. It's the organizing principle behind your psyche, and it has its own agenda. Wholeness. Now here's where the tension begins. The ego wants comfort, safety, and approval. It wants predictable outcomes, and often clings to the known, even when the known is painful. The self, on the other hand, seeks growth, truth, and integration. And it doesn't care if that growth means shaking things up. So, when you experience upheaval, contradiction, loss, or mystery, it's not necessarily a sign of failure. It could be a sign that your ego's version of reality is being challenged, and the self is trying to break through. Jung observed that many major life events, breakups, job losses, existential crises, are actually messages from the self. They're designed to interrupt the ego's illusion of control and point you toward a deeper, more authentic path. That's why the things that seem to ruin your life often end up becoming the things that define your life. They strip away what's false, so what's real can emerge. This tension between ego and self isn't a flaw in the system, it is the system. Life is the back and forth dynamic between these two forces. Ego trying to hold on, self trying to unfold, and you, the conscious witness, are caught in the middle. You feel the pull in both directions. You want certainty and freedom, safety and truth, belonging and individuality. These contradictions don't mean you're broken, they mean you're alive. Jung didn't suggest eliminating the ego or surrendering blindly to the self. He taught integration. He wanted people to become conscious participants in this inner dialogue. When you realize your suffering has meaning, that your crisis has intelligence behind it, you stop resisting and start listening. You begin to live not as a victim of circumstances, but as a co-author of your evolution. Think of your life not as a series of unrelated events, but as chapters in a story written by both your ego and yourself. The more you become aware of this co-authorship, the more you begin to live on purpose, with depth and clarity. Now that we understand the dynamic between the ego and the self, we can dive deeper into how this inner conversation shapes every aspect of your external life. Jung saw life as a psychological drama, not between you and the world, but within you, between who you think you are and who you actually are. This tension doesn't just influence your internal feelings. It shapes your relationships, your career, your creativity, and even your spirituality. Every person you meet is not random. According to Jung, your relationships act as mirrors, tools through which the unconscious parts of you become visible. That friend who constantly frustrates you, they're likely reflecting a part of yourself you haven't accepted. That partner who seems to complete you, they might be carrying your projected anima or animus, your inner masculine or feminine principle. Jung called this projection, and it's how the unconscious places parts of itself onto others so they can be seen, experienced, and eventually reclaimed. When you fall in love, you're often not seeing the other person clearly. You're seeing your own unlived qualities reflected in them. And when relationships break down, it's frequently because the unconscious no longer needs that particular mirror, or the ego refuses to face what's being revealed. This is why the end of a relationship can feel like a psychic death. It's not just loss, it's transformation. But projection isn't limited to romance. You project onto your boss, your parents, celebrities, and even God. We're constantly externalizing the contents of our psyche. The question isn't if you're projecting. It's what you're projecting and why. Until you reclaim those projections, you will be at the mercy of external people and events, never realizing that what you're reacting to lives inside you. Dreams, too, play a vital role in this process. Jung believed that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, not random nonsense, but carefully constructed messages from the self. They use symbolic language animals, archetypes, landscapes to express what the conscious mind cannot yet grasp. If you ignore your dreams, you're ignoring the unconscious trying to reach you. But if you learn to engage with them, not interpret them rigidly, but relate to them, you open up an inner dialogue that can guide your waking life in profound ways. And then there are synchronicities, those uncanny coincidences that seem too meaningful to be random. Jung defined synchronicity as the meaningful intersection of an inner psychological state with an outer event. For example, thinking deeply about a childhood wound and then receiving a call from someone involved in that period of your life, or dreaming about a symbol and encountering it in waking life the next day. These are not accidents. They are signs that the boundary between inner and outer reality is more porous than we imagine. Jung believed that synchronicities occur when the self is particularly active, when something crucial is trying to become conscious. These moments invite us to pause and pay attention. They suggest that life is not just happening, it's communicating. And the more conscious you become, the more you notice this conversation unfolding all around you. You begin to realize life is intelligent, not in a rational, calculated way, but in a symbolic, soul-driven way. It's not random. It's meaningful, and it's always working toward one thing, your wholeness. As we continue exploring Jung's framework of life, one truth becomes increasingly evident. Everything, absolutely everything, is in service of individuation. This term, unique to Jungian psychology, refers to the process of becoming whole, of integrating all aspects of the self, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, persona and soul. It's not about self-improvement, perfection, or becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming who you've always been, but haven't yet become aware of. Here's the catch. Individuation often begins with a crisis, not because life is cruel, but because the ego rarely questions itself when things are going smoothly. When life falls apart, when what once worked no longer works, that's often the moment when individuation begins. Jung viewed the midlife crisis, for example, not as dysfunction, but as initiation. It marks the point when the ego's goals, success, approval, status start to feel empty. The self begins to emerge, demanding more depth, more honesty, more alignment. This doesn't always look graceful. In fact, it often looks like breakdown, depression, anxiety, confusion, spiritual emptiness. But beneath that chaos is a deeper intelligence, one that is reshaping your inner world so that it can hold a more complete version of who you are. One of the first stages in individuation is confronting the shadow, the parts of yourself you've denied, repressed, or judged as unacceptable. This includes qualities you may have buried long ago. Your anger, vulnerability, ambition, even joy. These parts don't disappear. They live in the unconscious, waiting to be seen. When ignored, they can sabotage your life from behind the scenes. But when acknowledged and integrated, they become powerful allies. Jung emphasized that facing the shadow isn't about becoming darker or more cynical. It's about becoming more real. As you reclaim the rejected aspects of yourself, you grow in wholeness. You stop pretending. You stop living through a mask. And in doing so, you make space for deeper authenticity. Another key part of individuation involves the encounter with the anima or animus, your inner feminine or masculine principle. Regardless of gender, Jung believed that every man carries an unconscious feminine element, anima, and every woman carries an unconscious masculine element, animus. These inner figures influence how you relate to others, particularly in intimate relationships. When unrecognized, they distort how you see romantic partners. You might idealize them, villainize them, or feel an intense pull that makes no rational sense. That's because you're not just relating to a person. You're relating to a projected inner figure. Through relationship challenges and heartbreaks, life is nudging you to reclaim these projections, to internalize the qualities you've externalized, to realize what you saw in the other was something within yourself all along. Individuation also involves a shift in identity. The persona, the mask you wear to function in society, must be seen for what it is, a necessary but limited part of you. Most people confuse the persona for their true self, but individuation asks you to go deeper, to ask, who am I beneath the roles I play? What remains when I'm not performing? This process is not a one-time event. It unfolds over a lifetime. It's a spiral, not a straight line. Each relationship, each dream, each loss, each breakthrough brings you closer to the self, and with every step, you move from fragmentation toward unity. Understanding individuation as a lifelong spiral, rather than a linear path, allows us to be more compassionate with ourselves during the messiest, most uncertain seasons of life. Jung never promised that the journey toward wholeness would be clean or easy. In fact, he insisted that it would be disruptive because becoming whole requires dismantling the illusions we've built our identities on. Jung knew this firsthand. During his infamous Red Book period, he wasn't just experimenting with abstract theories. He was living the process after his break from Freud. Jung plunged into the depths of his unconscious, engaging with dreams, visions, and inner figures that challenged every notion of sanity. To the outside world, he seemed lost, but internally, something profound was happening. He wasn't breaking down. He was breaking open. Through this radical inner journey, Jung discovered what he would later call the self, not the ego, not the persona, not the collection of social masks, but the true center of the psyche. The self is not your ideal self. It's not your best self. It's the total self, the paradoxical, multi-layered, contradictory wholeness that includes all parts of you, light and dark, order and chaos, logic and intuition. The self isn't something you invent. It's something you uncover. Jung's Red Book experiences revealed that when you surrender to the process, when you stop resisting the unconscious and start engaging with it, life begins to reorganize itself around your deeper truth. Synchronicities increase, symbolic dreams become more vivid, and even your relationships begin to reflect the changes happening inside you. This kind of transformation isn't limited to mystics or psychologists. Jung believed that every life follows this arc, whether we realize it or not. Life is always trying to lead us toward individuation. The question is not whether you're on the path. It's whether you're walking it consciously or unconsciously. The more unconscious you are, the more life has to turn up the volume to get your attention. Patterns will repeat. Relationships will echo the same themes. Inner conflict will intensify until something finally breaks through. But when you start participating consciously, when you ask, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of, why is this happening to me? You shift from victim to co-creator. You stop chasing happiness and start seeking meaning. You stop trying to be good and start trying to be whole. This shift is subtle but seismic. It changes how you relate to everything from your career to your health, from your past to your purpose. Even your suffering takes on a new dimension. Jung didn't sugarcoat pain. He didn't pretend life was always light-filled and blissful. Instead, he taught that suffering is often the crucible through which individuation occurs. Just as coal becomes a diamond under pressure, your soul becomes integrated through challenge, not because pain is noble, but because it breaks the shell of the ego and reveals what's beneath. And here lies the paradox. Individuation doesn't make life easier. It makes life truer. It strips away false comforts and demands that you live from your depths. It doesn't promise certainty, but it does offer meaning. And for Jung, that was everything. If individuation is the purpose of life, then story is the vessel that carries it. Jung discovered that humans don't merely experience life. We narrate it. We make meaning through storytelling. And those stories aren't just reflections of what's happened. They actively shape how we interpret and live through events. You're not just living your life. You're living a story about your life. And that story is rarely one you chose consciously. It was written by your unconscious, by childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, ancestral wounds, unexamined beliefs. These stories operate like software in the background, directing your perceptions, your relationships, even your sense of identity. For example, one person may carry a story of abandonment. People always leave me. This story becomes a lens through which they view every relationship. They may unconsciously choose unavailable partners, interpret normal distance as rejection, or sabotage connections out of fear. And life, through this filter, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another might carry the myth of the martyr. I must sacrifice myself to be worthy. They overgive, overextend, and end up resentful, wondering why no one reciprocates. But it's not fate, it's narrative. Until they become aware of the myth they're living, they can't choose a new one. Jung called these unconscious life narratives personal myths, and he found that everyone lives within one: the victim, the hero, the orphan, the seeker, the outsider, the savior. These archetypal patterns don't just belong to fairy tales, they live in you. And unless you bring them into consciousness, they'll run your life from the shadows. The beauty is this: once you recognize your myth, you can re-author it, not through positive thinking or denial, but by consciously participating in your story. You can shift from being the unconscious character to the conscious co-creator. You may not control every event in your life, but you do shape the meaning. And meaning is everything. Jung himself lived this way. He recognized his life as a myth in real time, the myth of the explorer of the unconscious, the bridge between psyche and soul. He wasn't under the illusion that he was simply Carl Jung, a man doing a job. He knew he was a symbol in a larger story, a vessel through which something deeper was expressing itself. When you begin to see your life this way, something incredible happens. Every person becomes a character, helping you evolve. Every obstacle becomes a plot twist, pushing you toward truth. Every emotion becomes part of the emotional tone of the narrative. Life becomes not just something you endure, but something you engage with. This doesn't make pain disappear, but it gives pain context. It transforms suffering into part of a larger arc. And with that, even your darkest moments gain a kind of sacredness. They're no longer meaningless, they're chapters. You realize, I'm not just here to survive this life. I'm here to live a story worth telling, one where I become whole, one where I awaken. At the center of Jung's vision is a powerful and humbling truth. You are not merely a person living a life, you are life itself, becoming aware of itself through the form of you. This isn't a poetic metaphor. It's a literal, psychological, and spiritual reality that Jung reached through decades of inner exploration, dream analysis, and observation of thousands of patients. You are not separate from life. You are life, experiencing what it means to be human. In this view, even your body, your identity, your personality, these are vehicles, not destinations. The real event is consciousness learning, growing, expanding, not through ideas, but through embodied experience. Love, loss, joy, grief, fear, wonder, all of it is life stretching itself, discovering itself, refining itself through the uniqueness of your existence. This also means that your life is inherently meaningful, not because of what you achieve, but because of what consciousness experiences through you. Every time you forgive, every time you feel, every time you dare to look inward instead of running away, life grows in complexity and depth. Jung's work on the collective unconscious supports this. He found that beneath our individual psyches, there's a shared reservoir of archetypes, instincts, symbols, a collective psychological blueprint shared by all humans. This means that your journey is both uniquely personal and universally human. When you heal something in yourself, you're also healing something for the whole. When you confront your shadow, you're wrestling with a force that echoes through time. This is why individuation isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's your contribution to the evolving consciousness of humanity. And it's also why your struggles are not meaningless. Even when no one else sees what you're going through, even when your progress feels invisible, it matters because it changes the shape of consciousness itself. And what about death? Jung didn't view it as an end, but as a transformation. Just as the ego must die for the self to emerge, the body must dissolve for consciousness to evolve. You're not merely preparing for death. You're preparing for a deeper birth. And all the work you do in this life, becoming more conscious, more whole, more loving goes with you. This understanding radically changes how you live. You stop trying to win life like it's a game. You stop comparing your path to others. You begin to live with reverence because you know every moment is life, looking at itself, feeling itself, knowing itself through you. So how do you live this out? You become honest with yourself. First, you slow down and listen to your dreams. You pay attention to what triggers you. You stop ignoring the ache in your chest that says something more is trying to emerge. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what is life trying to become through me? You begin to trust that everything is unfolding as part of a deeper logic, even if your ego can't comprehend it. You develop patience with the process. You stop fighting your story and start inhabiting it. Living as if life is happening through you and not to you requires a radical shift in responsibility. It doesn't mean passivity. In fact, it means taking more responsibility, not for controlling outcomes, but for becoming deeply aware of how your inner world shapes your outer reality. Jung wasn't interested in shallow fixes or surface-level positivity. He challenged people to go inward, to confront their unconscious material, and to take ownership of the inner forces that were silently directing their lives. This is why the path of individuation is often uncomfortable, because real transformation demands that you face not just your fears, but your own complicity in your suffering. It asks, how are you unconsciously recreating your pain? How are you reinforcing the very beliefs that keep you stuck, not to shame you, but to free you? Because once you see the pattern, you can stop dancing it. And here's the paradox. The more inner work you do, the less personal life starts to feel. You realize that you're not the ultimate source of your suffering. You're the space in which healing can occur. You're not the author of every event. You're the one who gives those events meaning. You're not just a character in the drama, you're also the witness to it all. Jung often said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But who you truly are isn't a fixed identity. It's an evolving story, a story that only you can live. And when you live it consciously, you're not just surviving, you're participating in something sacred. Your purpose, then, isn't to be perfect. It's to be whole, to include all of yourself. The broken parts, the beautiful parts, the parts still in process. Wholeness isn't about fixing, it's about integrating. And in that integration, you create something stronger than perfection. You create authenticity. So where do you begin? You begin by becoming curious, by treating your life like a dream, asking what the symbols, relationships, and events are trying to show you. You begin by noticing where you feel numb or stuck or compulsive, and gently asking, what part of me is trying to speak through this? You begin by letting go of the need to be right and embracing the need to be real. And in that realness, something astonishing happens. You begin to feel more alive, more connected, more grounded, not in certainty, but in truth. You become less reactive and more reflective, less ruled by fear and more guided by meaning. Life becomes less about achievement and more about participation. Even the simplest moments take on new depth. A walk becomes communion. A conversation becomes insight. A heartbreak becomes initiation. You stop asking, how do I make this life work? And start asking, how can I allow life to work through me? Because that's what Jung ultimately discovered. You are not a mistake. Your life is not an accident. You are the precise expression of life trying to become conscious in a way it never has before. And if you live into that truth fully, courageously, honestly, then your existence becomes more than just a story. It becomes a sacred offering. If you found meaning in this journey, support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. And remember, you're not here to figure life out. Life is figuring itself out through you.